Good morning and welcome to the July 1st, 2021 MAPS 4 board meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. First item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the June 3rd, 2021 MAPS 4 Citizens Advisory Board meeting. If anybody has any comments or a motion to approve. Oh, I'm so sorry. Please vote. Okay, motion passed. Thank you. So moving on to the next item, our MAPS 4 revenue and expenditure report. David?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have in your packet the revenue expenditure report for the MAPS 4 funds for the period ending May 31st, 2021. On the revenue side, for the month, we have $11,486,568 and total revenues of $115,042,033. So you notice that we're still about 5% below projections, but the next check was significant also, so we should be gaining on that. I'm going to estimate that we'll be close to 3% by next month. On the expenditures for the month, $110,111 and a total expenditures of $770,778. I'll try to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? If not, we'll take a motion. Okay, please vote. Motion passed. Thank you for that report, David. Okay, so moving on to item 4, presentations. Today we have a couple of guests. Matt Boggs, the city treasurer, is here to talk to us a little bit about the banking investments and how the funds are being handled. So Matt.
All right, good morning and happy fiscal new year from the finance department. And I will address you as treasurer, but also really quick, I want to say as a resident of Ward 7, just thank you for the work that you're doing. I know we know the importance of the MAPS 4 Citizens Advisory Board and the work that it takes to do that, and you're pivotal to the MAPS program. So as a resident, thank you for that. But as treasurer, also thank you for taking the interest in this, and really what I'm here to do today is to answer 2 simple questions, and that is, where's the money, and is it safe? And so hopefully I can, and the slide works. So to do that, I got a couple of things. We'll talk about the bank account for MAPS 4, how that is handled, where that is, and we'll talk a little bit about collateralization. That's something that we're required to do under state statutes, and how that helps us and helps to keep the money safe. Most of the funds, however, are invested currently. We'll talk about the city's investment policy, what I'm tasked to do with that, and how we feel confident that those funds are safe. And finally, a theme you'll see throughout here this morning is that when I'm talking about these operating investments, this is separate and distinct from the investment and operating trust. That is going to take place later on. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that, but when we talk about these funds today, that is not the investment and operating fund. So first, we'll just talk about the cash that's sitting in the pooled bank account. It is called the pooled bank account because it's exactly what it sounds like. Various departments, divisions, locations throughout the city all have their money pooled together in a large bank account. It's held at JP Morgan. I checked this morning, the balance was around $21.4 million. That a number of departments go through there. We call it the operating for the very reason it's a lot of the operations of the city go through that bank account. But one key aspect is, as you very well know, that the FDIC is insured up to $250,000. And the question we often get is, well, what about the amounts above $250,000? State statutes require something called collateralization. The state statutes require it at 102%. The city investment policy requires it at 110%. And really, if you want collateralization in the simplest terms, it's really insurance for our funds. JP Morgan will, at a separate financial institution or the Federal Reserve, hold an investment policy essentially for us in our name, such that in the dire circumstances that JP Morgan were to fail, we could then go and collect on that so our funds would be safe. For this case, there is a note that's held, a letter of credit with the Federal Home Loan Bank of Cincinnati. And so we have that letter, a copy of that. In those dire circumstances, we would then be able to go to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Cincinnati and collect on that. I checked on the accounting reports. As of May 31st, which corresponds with your revenue expenditure report, there was around a neighborhood of $1 million in the operating cash account that was designated for MAPS 4. But like I said, the overwhelming majority of those funds are invested. Now, as of May 31st, we have what's known as the operating portfolio. That is the biggest investment portfolio for the city of Oklahoma City. At May 31st, the balance was $1.08 billion. Of that amount, 113.77, or 10.5%, is attributed to MAPS 4, for the MAPS 4 sales tax. And so as we talk about the operating portfolio, think about 10% is going to be related to MAPS. Now, we do have an investment policy, and that investment policy was crafted taking the Constitution of the state of Oklahoma, the charter for the city of Oklahoma City, as well as state statutes that govern investments for localities. So think cities, counties, and whatnot. So we have certain rules. At the end of the day, I've got about 9 things I can invest in. Those are U.S. Treasuries, U.S. agencies, and money market funds make up the bulk. Others, commercial papers, certificates of deposits, repurchase agreements, we have the ability to, we've got one certificate of deposit, but we really spend most of our time in the treasuries, agencies, and money market funds. In the investment policy, I have 3 directives in a very specific order. It's safety, liquidity, and yield. I need to make sure that the investments are safe. I need to make sure they're available, they're liquid, we can use those for operations. And I need to make sure I'm making a money market rate of return. And we're not trying to beat the market, it's just trying to stay safe. And so this is an important time to notice the distinction between this portfolio and, let's say, the retirement portfolio for the employee retirement system, or eventually the MAPS Investment and Operating Trust. They will have a separate investment policy, separate types of investments, and will earn a much higher rate of return than I have in my operating portfolio, because they have different policies and different directives that come from there. And so the safety is the #1 concern. U.S. Treasuries, those are direct obligations of the United States government, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. When it comes to credit worthiness, considered the gold standard in the investment realm, extremely safe investments. U.S. agencies, those are government-sponsored enterprises that have a quasi-government function. They are not backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, but there's an implied backing there, also considered extremely safe. And then the rest are money market funds. We keep those really because those are extremely liquid. They earn better than a regular savings account at a bank would do, but we're able to quickly put those to work if we need to. This is the makeup of the operating portfolio as of May 31st. So $1 billion, 113 of that would be attributed to MAPS 4. 41% would be in Treasury notes, those direct obligations of the United States government. If you look at all the others, the FFCB, FHLB, those are all our government-sponsored entities, the U.S. agencies. All in total, those make up about 48% of our portfolio at that time. The biggest which is going to be the Federal Farm Credit Bank bonds of 20% and the Federal Home Loan Bank bonds of 14%. Like I said, those are government-sponsored enterprises. those are considered extremely safe, have a little bit more return that come than the treasuries, but we keep quite a few of those in our portfolio as well. You'll also see the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corp and the Federal National Mortgage Association, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, if you've heard those terms. That's what those bonds are. 11% we keep in the money market funds, so in excess of $100 million as of May 31st. I always think this is kind of interesting to show the ladder. And this essentially, this graph that you're looking at here are when we have maturities. In the operating portfolio, we have what's known as the ending days to maturity average of 489 days. That means that most of the maturities we're holding will mature in the next 500 days or so. And you can see that we manage our portfolio in such a way, we have roughly $10 million that mature each and every month that we can then either employ at the City of Oklahoma City for operations, or we can invest out further down the ladder. The black bars are going to be the investments that we purchased in June of 2021. You'll notice that we have those really big spikes towards the beginning of each calendar year. That is when our general obligation bond payments, the debt is due on that. So what we do is right before the time that those payments are due, we have a lot of maturities. So we have the cash on hand to make those payments. That's how we manage that. And so as we have larger projects, this is relevant for you, for the MAPS 4 board, as those come on, we will know, hey, when those cash needs are going to be, and we will have maturities right around those times where the cash needs are. That means that cash is not sitting idle, but also cash is going to be available whenever the large projects start to take place. This has lots of good news and lots of bad news in this. So this is our comparison to the benchmark. So the good news is that we have tracked with the benchmark for the last 7 years. You can see that the green is the operating account. The red is our benchmark, which is the 0 to 3 year U.S. Treasury Index. And we've been toe-to-toe with the benchmark for the last 7 years. The bad news is that rates have plummeted over the last couple of years. They were already on a downward trajectory starting in January of 2019, but as you may well know, after the COVID-19 pandemic, the Federal Reserve lowered rates, and you can see that deep dive there in 20 to where our rate is less than 0.5%. Looking back, our 1 year average total rate of return was 0.34%. The good news was that we employ what's known as a buy and hold strategy. We're not selling our investments all the time. We'll buy these bonds, we'll hold them to maturity. We have the yield to maturity book value at 0.92%, which gains us a little bit more. But as you probably saw from the revenue expenditure report earlier, with having $113 million in investments, even with that, we've gained about $702,000 in interest income in the life of the MAPS 4 program. And so really at the onset, I told you I was answering two questions. Where's the money, and is it safe? And because our cash balances that we hold in the bank are collateralized, we feel those are safe. Because we can only invest in certain types of investments that are considered high quality, only approved investments both from the state statutes and our investment policy, which is a little bit more restrictive, we feel that those are safe. And once again, I just want to reiterate that this is separate and distinct from the investment and operating fund. So that those investments have not yet been put to work. The trust has been formed. It looks like the first meeting will be sometime in August. There will be an investment consultant, and investment policy will be created. From there, those investments will be made and will be completely different than these type investments, because oftentimes people look at our portfolio and say, well, my 401k is doing a lot better than this. Well, I can't invest in those things, and I really shouldn't, because that safety, liquidity, and yield is what I'm worried about in this operating portfolio. But with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have about the banking investments.
Any questions? No? Matt, thank you so much. Thank you for taking care of our money and keeping it safe. Okay. So moving on to our next presentation, Jason is here, and he is going to give us a presentation on the Innovation District and venue projects. So welcome, Jason.
Morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, board members. It's great to see everyone this morning. Not to downplay the excitement of the beginning of the fiscal year, but I did want to wish everybody a early Happy July 4th. Obviously, we're on our way to a long holiday weekend. So anyways, it's good to see everybody. Thank you for having us. We're happy to come here and present, as we always are. So today, we are going to continue this process that we've been through for the last 3 months, really, of spending a little bit more time in each one of the projects, talking to you a little bit about some of the details of the projects, and really talking to you a little bit about the resolution language, about the budgets and the project schedules, at least as we understand them as of today. And so today is really the last group of projects. We've got two subcommittees that we're going to, projects within two subcommittees that we're going to talk about today. So you can see there on the slide the Innovation District and the venues, or the Innovation District Subcommittee and the Venue Subcommittee. And so the projects that are in those two subcommittees are what we're going to talk about today. I have to say this does feel a little bit about like the last class before the final. Like we've spent a lot of time going through a lot of information over the last several months. And so we've brought with us a slide, as we've done in previous presentations, to just really recap the things that we've talked about to date. Really, this has been going on since the first of the year. So January we came, we gave a presentation to you about some information on some of the advocate meetings that we had. We gave a really extensive presentation in February, just about the implementation plan, what it looked like. If you'll remember, we really looked at it through the lens of the MAPS 3 implementation plan, the content that was contained in that plan, the process by which that plan was put together. And then we talked to you a little bit about how the MAPS 4 implementation plan might be different from that. In March, we came back, we went through all 16 projects, talked to you a little bit more about the project advocate meetings. And then, as I said, really for the last 3 months, we've been going through really subsets of the overall program. And so, as I said, today is the last group of projects. It's the last class before the final. And so the rest of the time here that we have this morning is going to be spent on these two subcommittees. So just real quick, as we've done previously, we've got just a slide here to summarize the projects that are included in these two subcommittees. And so you'll see the Innovation District on the left. Obviously, that's the project that the Innovation District Subcommittee is built around. The three on the right are the three projects that are contained in the Venue Subcommittee, so Downtown Arena, Fairgrounds Coliseum, and the Multipurpose Stadium. I did notice this morning a couple of typos, and this is one of them. The budget for the Downtown Arena is not $63 million. It's $115 million, so I want to point that out for the board. We did include some language as we have previously. The excerpts from the resolution that you see there, those are straight out of the resolution, and to us, they really speak to really the goals of each one of the projects, the aspirational goals of the projects, what they're intended to accomplish. And so we bring that to you this morning just for your consideration as you're thinking about these projects. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started right from the top here with the Innovation District. And so really, as we've done with the other projects, I'd like to really just start with the resolution because, as we've said previously, that's really what's guiding the plan. It's obviously great to have a document put together to help guide us in terms of the scope and the budgets of each one of the projects. And so really what you see here is really just a picture of the Innovation District. So $71 million budget, really divided into four primary components. You can see the operating fund, which the city treasurer talked a little bit about this morning, $21 million, about 30% of the overall project budget. The resolution, if you'll go back and read the language in the resolution, it does identify that operating fund is intended to support not only the Innovation Hall, but also the H.B. Foster Center. It also says that the return that might be realized from that fund is also anticipated to be supplemented by other operating sources, funding sources. So the language speaks a little bit about that. The resolution speaks a little bit about that. The H.B. Foster Center, the second component that you see there in the lower right-hand corner of the slide, $15 million. The resolution does identify the fact that the H.B. Foster Center is intended to support entrepreneurship, small business development for Northeast Oklahoma City and other parts of the city. It talks a lot about minority small businesses, disadvantaged businesses, and so this center is really, the intention is for this center to support those initiatives. There is mention in the resolution, we've talked about this previously, this December 31st, 2026 date that's mentioned several times in the resolution. It does appear In the Innovation District project, it talks about the need to identify an operating or establish an operating agreement for the H.B. Foster Center by that date. Moving across, the lower left-hand corner of the slide is the connectivity portion of the Innovation District project. And so $25 million is identified in the resolution as being allocated to connectivity. One thing I would like to point out, and if you go back and read the resolution, you'll gather this, there's really two components to connectivity. One being connectivity to the neighborhoods surrounding the Innovation District. And then another component is a bridge over Broadway Extension. Bridge or bridges, I think, is the way that it's listed in the resolution. And so the way the resolution reads is at least half of that allocation needs to be spent on neighborhood connectivity. And so not to say that we couldn't spend more, but just for the purposes of trying to communicate, I think what the intent was, you'll notice that gray portion of this graph is divided 50-50 between the bridges on I-235 and the neighborhood connectivity, and so that's why that's there. As it relates to the Innovation Hall, a lot to unpack. I am not going to read this verbatim. The resolution goes into great detail about what would be included in that facility. It does talk a little bit about funds being raised from a non-MAP source as a match to the project, and so there's some indication in the resolution of that. Really, the Innovation Hall, as the slide says, just a place where activities to grow our city's innovation economy can happen. It talks a little bit about the programming that we might expect at that facility. And then, as with the H.B. Foster Center, it talks a little bit about the approval of an operating agreement. And so obviously that'll be something that needs to be accomplished. There is some language, the last bullet that you see there, about co-working facilities. Obviously, there are some of those facilities already in Oklahoma City. And so there was an intent with the resolution that this facility would consider those and build relationships with those facilities if possible. And so that's really what the $71 million looks like, just in a snapshot. So we'll spend a little bit of time on each one of these. The first one that I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is the H.B. Foster Center. So I thought a good place to start might be just where the H.B. Foster Center is located. So we've included a map there in the lower right-hand corner of the slide. So it's on the southeast corner, Lincoln Boulevard and Northeast 4th Street. You can see it highlighted there on the map. The building was originally the East Side YMCA, and so it was built in 1951. And during segregation, it was the only Y open to African Americans, and so it's got really a rich history. Currently, the Oklahoma City Parks Department has programs that are operated inside the H.B. Foster Center. And so there's a lot of things going on there. In particular, there's lifeguard training that occurs there. There's a pool within the facility. And so that's obviously something that we'll have to deal with whenever we go to renovate the facility as a part of this project. We've already talked a little bit about, I think, the goals of the project. I just wanted to share with you some of the proposed programming that's been provided to us by the Oklahoma City Innovation District and the people around this project. So you can see here some of the things that we anticipate. Business basics, mentorship, access to funds, sales and contracts, community connections, networking opportunities. And so really just a whole host of things, again, to support small business, disadvantaged business, minority businesses, and so it'd really be a great facility. The Innovation District, the people around this project have provided us some indication of some peer facilities that are across the country, and so we've listed a couple of those there. We've the Enterprise Center in Philadelphia, the Minority Business Accelerator in Cincinnati. So I would suggest if you are really interested in the types of things that might go on in this facility, I'd encourage each of you to go and maybe research those a bit online and see what those are about. As I said, the Oklahoma City Parks Department, they do have programs that are operating the facility, and so the Willa D. Johnson Center, Community Center, which is currently in construction, is anticipated to open in spring of '22, and so the idea is that the programs that are currently at the H.B. Foster Center, once that facility is complete, is they will move over to the Willa D. Johnson Center, and so basically in the spring of '22, this building will be vacant and ready to move forward as part of this project. So. Innovation District, as it relates to connectivity, again, $25 million. You can see the two components that we've already talked about a little bit this morning. We've included some information regarding the project goals for the bridges. Obviously, enhanced connections to neighboring districts, greater walkability, bikeability. You can see the image there in the upper left-hand corner. There's this vision of there being a park-like space that maybe the Innovation District could host events or activities on. And so really, again, a peer project, if you're interested in this, Fifth Street Bridge in Atlanta was a project that was considered or looked at whenever this project came forward in the summer of 19. And so I'd encourage you, if you're interested in this, again, to go and do some research on your own and look at that. As it relates to neighborhoods, we've got a couple of images that I'll point out. Really the neighborhoods portion of the connectivity part of the Innovation District project is really focused on connections to adjacent neighborhoods. So trying to get residential neighborhoods to some key locations or destinations in the Innovation District. So we've listed a few of those here. Washington Park, obviously in the south side of the district, it's highlighted there on the image at the bottom of the slide. The H.B. Foster Center, which we've already talked about. And then really just to the northeast 4th Street corridor. And so there will be pedestrian improvements made in the northeast 4th Street corridor as a part of a separate project that's outside of MAPS 4. But obviously, as we think about connectivity, if we can get pedestrians, bikes to that corridor, that's a benefit for the district. So that's really kind of connectivity in a nutshell. Innovation Hall, the things I think that we would like to share with you, some of this you will have heard before, but the Innovation Hall was originally really born out of this 2017 Brookings Institute study that was brought forward to really talk about how to advance the Innovation District. And so there was a whole host of recommendations made in that study. You can go online and download that study and read it for yourself. But the Innovation Hall was one of these. I don't know that it was necessarily referred to as the Innovation Hall. There's another name in the report, but obviously you can go back and read that to find out some more information about the way that it was envisioned. It is anticipated to be part of a larger development effort. Those of you that are on social media, which is just about everybody, you'll probably noticed a lot of attention towards the end of 2020. We've included some sample imagery there in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide. And so it is anticipated that the Innovation Hall will be part of this larger development effort. The image that you see in the upper right-hand corner of the slide is some of the early imagery that the development team and the design teams kind of surrounding that larger effort prepared early on in their process. And so just to give you an idea of kind of what's envisioned. We do think that there will probably be, this larger project, there'll be a lot of streetscape improvements. We anticipate that there may be structured parking that's involved, and so those are some things that could be a part of the project. And then last couple of items, the resolution, I've already touched on it, mentions the $10 million in matching funds, identifies that it is intended to be a non-MAPS source. And so there's various places that this may come from. Kathy O'Connor at the Alliance came and presented. She talked a little bit about tax increment financing, new market tax credits. Obviously, with this larger development project, there's a chance that there'll be private funds involved. And so those are all possibilities in terms of how the budget might be supplemented for the project. Preliminarily, we think that the program for this facility might be on the order of 20 to 25,000 square feet. Obviously, as things progress and we get more clarity around the project, that will evolve. But as of today, that's kind of what we're envisioning. And so really quick, just a tabular representation of the budget. You can see the budget categories that we've looked at on all the projects, just giving you a snapshot of the budgets as we currently understand them. Obviously, the operating fund down at the bottom, it's actually intended to be $21 million, not $10 million, but obviously all of those dollars would go to the investment fund. Okay, and then just a snapshot of the project budget or project schedules that we anticipate. And so you can see that we're anticipating dividing the neighborhood or the connectivity portion really into three components. So the two that we've already mentioned, we think it may make sense to further subdivide the neighborhood connectivity piece into possibly two phases of work. And so you can see the schedule that we're anticipating there, plus or minus about 30 months, I believe, maybe just a bit over 30 months. And then the bridge improvements, obviously, as you can imagine, building a bridge over Broadway Extension involves not only city government, state government, Oklahoma Department of Transportation. It takes a lot of coordination. It takes a lot of time to get through that process. And so I think what our schedule is reflecting, or the schedule we anticipate, is that we're trying to allow for time to do that as a part of the process. H.B. Foster Center and Innovation Hall, I think the things I would touch on here, obviously you can read the overall project durations for yourself. Obviously the operating agreements are really important for both of these projects, and so we've allowed time early on in the project to get those worked out, and you can see that that allowance is made here in the schedule. So, okay, so onto the downtown arena. Just a really quick snapshot. Again, I'm going to just return to the resolution a little bit here. Really, $115 million for the project. The one thing I think that we need to point out here, and you may already be aware of this if you've spent some time reading the resolution, there is some indication of the resolution. There's two primary projects. So there's improvements to the downtown arena, and then there's also mentioned specifically the practice facility. And so there's some language in the resolution that limits the percentage of the budget that can be devoted to the practice facility. It says, I think, no more than is what it says. So not to say that it couldn't be less, but we've taken some liberties here, I think, is what I'm trying to say, to try to communicate what this budget may look like in the end of the project. So we've taken essentially $115 million, multiplied it times 9%. I think we rounded to the nearest $1 million on this slide. And so this is really kind of how the budget breaks down. And so $105 million devoted to the downtown arena, which is about 91% actually. And then $10 million to the practice facility, which is just slightly under 9%. So as it relates to the downtown arena, there's really not a whole lot of language in the resolution. It talks about addressing necessary capital maintenance, providing for fan and tenant improvements. And then on the practice facility side, obviously there's a language about limiting the budget. There's some reference to exactly where the practice facility is located. It talks about addressing necessary capital maintenance, providing fan and tenant enhancements. There is some language in the resolution related to the existing lease for the tenant that's there. And so, I guess all of that to say, I'm not sure that how much that has to do with the MAPS 4 program. Obviously, that involves other agencies and entities here at the city, but obviously the timing of that, the existing tenant, their lease ends sometime in 2023, and so that's something that will have to be considered. There's some language in the resolution that talks about the need to identify a source for future capital improvements outside the ones that we're going to be spending on MAPS 4. And so that's something that's contained in the resolution too. I believe the last bullet item in reality applies to both the practice facility and the downtown arena as I read the resolution. So it's a little bit misleading, I think, to have it just under the practice facility. I think it was intended to capture all of the facilities described in the resolution. So a little bit about the arena project. Obviously, we've had Chris Simmeroff from ASM come and present to the board. And he really communicated this intent to prioritize guest-facing components, fan amenities, and so we feel like that'll be some of the first things that move forward. We have had some preliminary conversations with both PBC and ASM. So we talked about this previously, I think, but PBC is really the business entity of the Oklahoma City Thunder, so they're obviously intimately involved with things that are going on at the Chesapeake Arena. ASM is the Chesapeake Arena and now the new Oklahoma City Convention Center operator, and so they're the ones that operate the facility for concerts and other events outside of Thunder activities. So anyways, we talked a lot with them. They've been very helpful. There has been a lot of preliminary work, I think, done for this project in preparation of MAPS 4, and so they shared with us a lot of information. I think that's been very helpful to this point. Currently, we think the downtown arena improvements really would be organized around essentially about 3 phases of work, and so we've listed those here. The northeast entry and fan amenities would be one of the early components. The southeast area improvements, building maintenance. So you probably remember there's an image there in the lower left-hand corner. This concept of a new southeast tower on the arena, exterior patio, and some different things. And so that's really, I think, captured in the second phase of work that we're anticipating. And then team offices. There's a need to move some of the ASM offices at the arena, expand the Thunder offices that are at the arena, and so that work would actually be done as a third phase of work as we see it today. We do anticipate that there's going to need to be a master planning effort early on before any of this work starts, and so as you might imagine, the Chesapeake Arena, it's a big facility, it's a complex facility in terms of building systems and different things. And the fact that these are large projects, and in reality, we don't ever want to shut the arena down. Like, there's a lot of great events that happen at the arena, and obviously it's good for the city if those things can continue to happen. So, obviously sitting here today, we don't know all the intricacies of every one of these projects, and so for that reason, we feel like it makes sense to possibly engage a team to come in, do a little bit more detailed assessment of the facility, put together a more detailed plan of the projects, how they might be sequenced, and also just update the construction cost estimates for the work. And so because of that, we anticipate this master planning effort would precede any of the other components. As you might expect, and I've alluded to a little bit here, we do anticipate it's a multi-year effort. And so, given the fact that we don't want to shut the arena down, our contractor will likely, as he's executing this work, have to think a lot about temporary conditions, making sure that people can get in and out of the arena safely and attend events while the construction's going on. So that'll be something we'll continue to watch. As it relates to the practice facility, again, I think most people know where this is located, but I thought it might be good just to throw it up here just so you guys could see it. It is 9600 North Oklahoma Avenue. It's mentioned in the resolution. It's on the really north and east of the intersection of Broadway Extension and Britton Road. And so we've highlighted it there on the map for you in case you're not familiar with it. We've already talked about the limitations on the budget that's identified in the resolution. A little bit about the improvements that we anticipate might be at the practice facility. We've listed several of them here. Maintenance projects, roof repairs, possibly new HVAC, mechanical systems, technology upgrades. And so those are all things that we might execute with this portion of the project, this portion of the budget. We would like to, I think, in talking with PBC, ideally these improvements would be made across the summer months. Obviously we can't necessarily get everything done inside of a 3-month window, but we're going to do our best, obviously, to do those things which might have the greatest impact on operations at the facility during a certain time of the year, just to help the tenant out, obviously. So that's something we'll be thinking about on this part of the project. You can see just a really quick summary of the budget. I'm not sure that there's a whole lot to talk about here, just giving you an idea of what the budgets look like as we see them today. You'll notice the contingency is a little bit higher on these projects, and I guess what I would say is on projects in the MAPS4 program where we're dealing with existing facilities, we have allocated a bit more money to contingency. As you might imagine, there's a little bit higher chance of unforeseen conditions when you're dealing with existing facilities, and so for that reason, we have a little bit more contingency in these two projects. And so a quick snapshot of the schedule. Again, the master planning effort that I talked about. As we see it today, that might be a 12 to 16-month process. We've provided some time for us to go out and secure that team to help us through that process. The 3 phases of work that you see there, the first 2 phases are obviously the larger phases. You can see the durations are somewhat larger, somewhere around 48 months. And then the last phase of work at the arena, maybe around 30 months, and then the practice facility also around 30 months. And so that's kind of the durations that we're anticipating as of today. So with that, previous presentations, we've kind of hit the pause button here. We've already presented a lot of information, so I just want to maybe stop and answer any questions that you might have on the 2 prior projects before we continue on. I know everybody gets tired of hearing me talk, so.
Any questions?
Hey.
Yeah, I had a question about the Innovation District.
Yes, ma'am.
As far as parking and the surrounding area where the neighborhoods and those housing are, is that area going to be affected or?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a larger plan for the district. I would say really the information that you saw on the slide is really all I have at this point. So there's other information out there. I'm not sure that I can completely answer that question as of right now. I mean, there will be impacts in that core area of the district, I think. There's obviously going to be a lot of construction occurring in there. I guess the way I see it is there's obviously neighborhoods around the Innovation District. The resolution talks about that. I'm not sure that there will be that much impact to those neighborhoods. I mean, there will be construction crews in those neighborhoods when they're constructing sidewalks and different things. But outside of that, I don't see a whole lot of impact, I don't think. Is that answering your question, or?
Yeah, I've had a couple of questions from people in the community about how they would be affected, if their housing would be affected or anything like that.
Yeah, I think most of the core area right now is a commercial area. I mean, there's no residential housing, I think, in that core area as of today. Most of the disturbance that I see in the neighborhood, the residential areas surrounding the district, would be construction crews from sidewalk construction primarily. And so there would be some impact, be relatively minor.
I mean, I think I would envision meetings with the neighborhood as we got closer to construction so they can have input and understand what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious about Innovation District also. The sidewalks on the Northeast 4th Street corridor, what's the timeline on that and where's the funding?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. I was just told that there's another project that's moving forward, so I'm not sure what the timing of that project is, but we can hunt that down and try to give you some information on it.
That would be great, yeah, if you could get that to us. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Then on the Innovation District, the connectivity doesn't have a public art component on slide 10. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, sir. So I might let David take this question. I guess what I would say is my experience. Well, I'm going to let the program manager here, Mr. Todd, probably answer that. There's some pretty specific guidance from the city in terms of where public art is at play. And
Right, so the city ordinance for 1% for art talks about parks and public buildings. And trails are parks, sidewalks are not. There will be a public art component within all of this as far as the building construction and those things. So there will be money set aside for the 1% for art, but not specifically from sidewalks.
Thank you.
Other questions? Great.
All right, we'll keep going here. Okay, so Fairgrounds Coliseum, obviously also a part of the venue subcommittee. And so again, I'm just going to return to the resolution language a bit here. The resolution mentions construction of a new arena to replace the existing aging venue. It talks pretty specifically about supplemental funding that's anticipated. And so there's some mention of $25 million in hotel tax revenue. This would be revenues that are earmarked for improvements at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds. And so there's a mention of that funding source, MAPS 3 excess funds, and then also naming rights. And so all of those sources are anticipated to supplement the $63 million budget that's identified in the resolution for this project. So I believe that we've already touched on this, but design of the Coliseum is currently underway. And so that has been funded through MAPS 3, and so that started in 2020. There's a team moving forward on that. Obviously, we've had various conversations about the existing Nork Arena, the need to replace it as quickly as possible. And so the fact that this project is in design right now, I think, is a little bit of evidence of that. We've talked about this a little bit, but just to, I guess, re-communicate here a little bit, there is an intended scope and sequence of the project. And so you'll see on the image in the upper right-hand corner of the slide, really trying to capture, at least at a conceptual level, what the project is and how it's anticipated to be configured. And so the existing Nork Arena lies at the center of the image. You can see it kind of outlined in red and kind of ghosted in or shaded in there. And so the idea behind the project is to build the new Coliseum south of the arena. It's a little bit disorienting if you're not familiar with the fairgrounds, but north is essentially to the left of that image. So build the new Coliseum to the south of the arena. Once that Coliseum is in place, the Nork Arena would be demolished and removed. And then the last phase of construction would essentially be to build a connector between the new Coliseum and what they refer to as the Super Barn. And so the Super Barn is the area on the fairgrounds where if you're here for a horse show, you stable your horses, or everything associated with that happens in the Super Barn. And so the connector would connect the Super Barn to the new Coliseum. And so that's really the last component of that, the intended sequence, I guess. I guess the one thing I would say, obviously there's this hope that this project would move forward quickly. Any of you that might be close to construction, the construction industry will know, like, the bid market is really has been crazy over the last 6 months. Everything is exorbitantly expensive. I think it's been covered in the media even a little bit. And so obviously if this project were to move forward relatively quickly, there's a potential that the bidding market may impact that. And so what we anticipate now, it's going to potentially impact the cost of the improvements. It may ultimately impact the scope of the improvements. And so obviously that's something that we'll need to think about and talk about as that project moves forward. So that's been a topic of conversation already. Just a really quick picture of the budget for this project. So again, just to clarify on it, the $63 million is the MAPS 4 funding piece. And so the pie graph that you see here is really just describing that $63 million. So for instance, you'll notice there is not a component of the $63 million that's dedicated to design. And the reason for that is, as I previously mentioned, the fact that that is being funded through MAPS 3, and so it doesn't come out of the $63 million. So, but really the other items that you see here, the other categories: contingency, administration, testing, art, all things that we've looked at before. And so that'll be a component of the budget, we think. So a really quick picture of the anticipated Coliseum budget. Really, the primary components, design, bidding, construction. You'll notice 42 months start to finish. I tried to identify here to try to capture this idea that design has already started. And so in a way, we're already halfway down this orange bar that you see here for design. That effort started in earnest around December of last year. And so we've got 6 or 7 months of design under our belt already, and are trying to move that project forward just as quickly as we can. And so, I think the schedule here captures kind of where we're at in the process. Okay, and then lastly, multipurpose stadium. Some of the things that I would share with you from the resolution, there's some pretty specific language in the resolution, suitable for professional and college soccer, high school football, and soccer and other events. It mentions other facilities around the country, every other large American city. You can see the image at the upper left, maybe a peer facility, what you might consider a peer facility in Kansas City. And as we've talked about with the other 15 projects, there's conversation in the resolution about an operating agreement, leasing agreement prior to this December 31st date. It does mention specifically that the operator must provide this self-sustaining operational model similar to our Bricktown Ballpark. And then it mentions, I guess, some of the things that I would mention, some of the topics that have surrounded this project, and I think the board has already heard this. Proximity of this facility to retail and dining and entertainment and other things are essential really to its success. And I think as we've already touched on a little bit too, the $37 million I think is envisioned primarily to fund the stadium itself. And so there are some other costs that will likely be associated with this effort. Primarily the things that we think about, land acquisition costs. Obviously it's in a downtown location, may be potentially relatively expensive, so that'll be something that we'll need to think about. And then also parking facilities. There was some, I think, conversation when this was brought forward to council in the summer of 19 that 2,700 parking facilities for up to 2,700 cars, and so obviously that's a significant expense and one that will likely not be able to be absorbed in the budget that we have today. And so that'll be, I think, a continuing topic of conversation. So just real quick, a picture of the budget you see here. I'm not sure that there's anything here really to point out other than the fact, like I said, there's no really land acquisition costs anticipated in this $37 million. Other than that, it's pretty standard to what we've seen with the other projects. And then just a really quick snapshot of how we anticipate this project might move forward. You can see it's relatively long. We've got about a 60-month duration shown here. We have allocated or made an allowance for about 12 months to negotiate an operating agreement with the operator. And I think the other thing that's really driving the schedule a lot is we do anticipate a relatively extensive site selection process. So those of you that might have been around when we were going through the convention center site selection process, it was an extensive process, maybe not quite that I don't anticipate that this one will be quite as extensive as that one, but it will be a similar process. And so because of that, we anticipate the design duration may be longer than what it otherwise would be on some of the other projects. And then you can see bidding and construction, so that's kind of what it looks like, 60 months plus or minus is kind of what we're thinking. And so with that, I think we are wrapped. We have gone through all 16 projects. As we've done previously, we are going to give you just a little bit of a preview, look ahead. As I said, this was the last class before the final. Next month is the final. We'll be bringing the implementation plan forward, so we're obviously really excited for that, to bring that forward for your consideration. And so I think we've gone through all 16, Madam Chair, and I think we're done, so I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Yes, any further questions? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes, okay. For the site selection, I know that we talked about 3 different locations. Has there been any other thought or what has been talked about that for the stadium?
No, well, there's not been conversations that I've been a part of, I would say. And I guess what I would say too, just to go back to Mr. Funk's presentation, to me, as I heard it, these were the sites that we considered as an organization prior to this becoming a part of the MAPS 4 program. So I don't know if I would characterize it as saying those are the 3 sites we're looking at. It was more those were the sites that they had considered prior to MAPS 4. So for whatever that's worth, I'm not saying that those are off the table. I'm just saying there's not been any further conversations about it.
Okay, so like it's still up in the air.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Other questions?
I have a quick question. On the fairgrounds, back to the Fairgrounds Coliseum. I know we used the MAPS 3 excess funds to do the design work. Is there any additional funds that we'll be using from MAPS 3 to fund any of part of the construction or anything else?
I think, did you want to say something, David? I'm sorry.
We don't anticipate, the way it was transferred, or the way the resolution said that that money would be used for design. If there's money left over, there's a question that some of it could be used, but there's going to be a lot of conversations on something like that through the needs in MAPS 3 and using it for MAPS 4. So I don't see that right now.
Okay. Second question. Since we're tearing down the Norick Coliseum, will now be called the Norick Arena, or will the name still stay?
I'm not sure I can answer it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
To be determined.
Yeah, TBD.
BD.
That's part of the fairgrounds contract is, I believe they have naming rights out there.
Very good.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Yes, you bet. Good
Yes.
question.
I just have one comment. Yesterday in the Daily Oklahoman, under at page 4, frankly speaking, MAPS 4 projects is the title. The question was asked, which project do you think should begin first and why? And there's an email address, and I'm sure Bill Crum had something to do with this, but your views at oklahoman.com is where you can send in what the public wants to see first. And I thought that was interesting, and hopefully we'll have some exciting returns and announcements from that.
Yes, and I will not be responding to that, just so you know, so.
Yeah. Anything else for Jason? Okay. Jason, thank you so much. I know you put a lot of time into putting these presentations together to get us all up to speed so that when we do have our final exam next month, we'll have a lot more background. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, so moving on to item 5, discussion items. Do we have anything, Mr. Todd?
We do not have anything.
Okay. Item 6, comments by board, staff, or citizens. Any citizens signed up to speak today? No? No citizen comment? Staff or board? Any board comments? No? No? Okay. And David, do you have anything?
I just want to thank everybody for being here back in person. And it's getting ready to get real busy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say thank you all. I know up to this point, it's been a lot of listening and, just trying to absorb and understanding the work that's gone in. But yeah, it's getting ready to get real, as my kids would say. So looking forward to next month, and hope all of you have a wonderful weekend, and stay safe and don't get washed away by the floods. Unless there's anything else, we will adjourn. Thank you all.